Right. Well, everyone, I think we should start with this amazing presentation that we're going to have. So, hello and good afternoon, everybody. My name's Natalie Holder, and I work at Hurtigruten. And today we're really lucky to have Dr. John Mason joining us to talk to us all about the Northern Lights and more with us at Hurtigruten. So, without further ado, I will pass over to John. If you have any questions, please jot them down in the chat, and I will ask the questions right at the very end. So thank you very much. John, over to you.
Thank you very much, Natalie, and good afternoon to everybody, wherever you are. My name's John Mason, and I have a great passion for the Northern Lights. And that passion for the Northern Lights goes back nearly 50 years to a night I remember well, the 4th, 5th of August, 1972. I lived in the south of England then, as I do now, and there was a display of Northern Lights that was actually visible from my home in Sussex in the south of England. It was something I'd never seen before, and I was absolutely amazed that I would see it. On the 13th of March 1989, there was another, even more spectacular display of Northern Lights, visible not only from southern England, but over the whole of Europe and most of North America as well. It was one of the greatest displays of the 20th century. And it was at that display that I decided that I really wanted to try and get up close and personal with this amazing natural phenomenon. And so from the late 80s on to now, I have been traveling into the Arctic almost every year to try and study and photograph and image the Northern Lights, and also share the experience with lots of other people. I've been very fortunate that I've taken lots of people into the Arctic and shared my passion of the Northern Lights with them. All the pictures of the Northern Lights that I've taken that I'm going to show you in this talk, and this is one of them, they were all taken from the deck of a Hurtigruten ship within the last 15 years, because that's how long I've been traveling up and down the coast of Norway with Hurtigruten, looking at this phenomenon. And the interesting thing is that a lot of people will say, well, why do you go on the ship when you could go on land? The answer is that traveling with Hurtigruten is a complete experience. It's not just about the Northern Lights, the wonders of the Arctic night sky. It's the whole experience of the Norwegian coast in winter. The world's most beautiful voyage is what they call it. And having done it so many times, you never tire of it. It's like the Northern Lights itself. No two displays of Northern Lights are ever the same. No two trips on the Hurtigruten are ever the same. There's always something different. And of course, we have to remember that Norway has a very close connection with the Northern Lights. This is a lovely frontispiece from a book written by Fridtjof Nansen, one of the greatest of Norwegian explorers. And he was very interested in the Northern Lights. And this is a lovely drawing that he did himself of a display that he saw on one of his trips into the North Polar region. People have been looking at the Northern Lights from ships for a long time. This is an artist's impression of a great display that happened in the 19th century that was observed from ships. And if you want to see the Northern Lights in the winter, you have to go within the Arctic Circle, and you have to travel there between the end of September and the beginning of April. I regularly get people coming up to me say, oh, we know you go to the Arctic very often. We're doing a trip to the Arctic. I say, oh, when are you going? Oh, we're going in May. Will we see the Northern Lights? No, you won't, because it's daylight all the time. You have to go when it's dark in the Arctic, and that is between end of September and the beginning of April. So that period we call the Northern Lights viewing season in the Arctic. And to travel in the winter on the Hurtigruten is a completely different experience to going in the summer. And I know many of you have probably traveled up the fjords in the summer, and it's an amazing experience, but it is a completely different world in the winter. And yes, it's a lot colder, but it is a really incredible experience. People often say to me, but surely it's pitch dark for 24 hours in the middle of the winter in the Arctic. No, it isn't. Even in the middle of winter, in the far north of the trip, you may get 18 hours of darkness, but you get 6 hours of twilight, that wonderful half light, half dark time when you can take some beautiful pictures of the snow-covered mountains, the scenery, the fields look amazing. So I want to take you through some typical Northern Lights viewing experiences that I've had on the trips I've made over the last 15 years. Now, a lot of people, of course, see pictures like the ones I'm going to show. And when they first see the Northern Lights for real, they say, why can't I see any colour? And the reason is because our eyes are not adapted for seeing colour when the light level is low. So, for example, we've got here the typical beginning of a Northern Lights display. We're travelling north. This is from the front of the ship looking north, and it's not even dark. As you can see, it's still twilight, and you can see those three faint green arcs across the northern sky there. Now, to the naked eye, they would look grayish or grey with a hint of green, depending on your eyesight and how it sees at night. With the camera, you will always see the colour because the camera will always pick up the colours better than the human eye. What you need to see the colours with the human eye is a display that's bright enough and vibrant enough and active enough to become bright enough so that your eyes can see the colour. And never a trip goes by where I don't have many occasions when that happens. But you've got to be ready. You've got to be prepared. One of the most common questions I get on board ship is, what time are the Northern Lights going to appear? This is a natural phenomenon. I don't throw a huge electricity switch and turn them on when everybody's out on deck. You have to be ready. They can occur without any warning. In a matter of minutes, it can go from nothing to an amazing display, and it can then die down again. And very often, a display will begin with one or more of these faint green arcs or arches across the northern sky, which, as I say, won't have much in the way of colour in them. They may not be changing very much, but once you know what to look for, you'll know that's where the display could be happening. Now, the key thing is that you don't know when it's going to develop. Now, over the years, I've developed the ideas of looking at these things and being able to guess when something might be able to happen. But I've stood out on deck for 5 or 6 hours looking at one of these faint green arcs, willing it to do something, and it stubbornly refuses to do so. And at the end of a few hours, you're getting cold, you're getting fed up, you want to go indoors and have a pee or have a cup of coffee, and that's fine, you can do that. But as soon as you go in, that's the signal for the Northern Lights to suddenly do something special. And in just a few minutes, you have a great display in the sky. You've been indoors, you come outside, 20 minutes later, it looks just the same when you come out as it did when you went in. You won't be aware what a great display, but don't worry. All those people who stayed out on deck and saw it are only too willing to tell you what a great show you missed. So the key thing is you've got to be there. You've got to stick with it because it's perseverance that matters. Now, these faint green arcs that came up in evening twilight, you can see to the left-hand side the picture there. It's still quite bright because the sun's not gone down long ago. A few minutes later, this is what happened. Now, this is a time-lapse movie made by taking a whole series of still images and putting them together in a film. And at the top right of the view there, you will see one of the most well-known of all star patterns, the Plough or Big Dipper. It's shaped like a saucepan, and in general, that will be in the northern part of the sky. And so the key thing when you first start on a trip is to work out which way is north, because the ship's going to be moving one way or the other, and you always need to, when you go out on deck, quickly identify which way is north. Now, this wasn't the calmest of nights. You can see that the ship is moving about a bit, but certainly you can also see the beautiful display that you saw there. And these structures can develop and change over a matter of minutes as you watch them. You very often find, if you watch a Northern Lights display in twilight, that you will see the colour more easily. And that's because the brightness of the background sky will trigger the colour sensors in your eye, so that when the Northern Lights do appear, you can see the colour in them. And sometimes you'll see the colour early on when it's still twilight, and then when the sky gets really dark, you'll find you can't see the colour as well as you did earlier on, unless the display becomes brighter. It's all about how our eyes perceive this in the darkness. Now, there are a number of different auroral forms. I've mentioned the arcs that look a bit like a faint bridge across the northern sky. And sometimes you'll see one of these arcs and you'll get these rays going up from the top of the arc, a bit like searchlight beams. And in times gone by, they thought the arc was a bridge between earth and heaven, and the rays that moved along the arc were the souls of people who died making their last journey from earth into heaven. And you can set yourselves in this mindset when you look at these amazing forms. One of the most dramatic auroral forms can be the auroral ribbon or band. And here we can see a lovely ribbon of auroral light snaking its way across a beautiful star-studded Arctic night sky. And these ribbons of light can change and distort quite rapidly over time. So let's look at another time lapse that I took now. This is on the most northerly part of the trip. This is just coming round from the North Cape. And you can see here, again, the incredible changes in structure and shape and form, these wonderful zigzags or S shapes coming up from the horizon, passing right overhead and going down again. But the ship is sailing into a bank of cloud. And now you can see the cloud bank coming over, but the northern lights are still bright enough to shine through that cloud bank. And so even if you have partial cloud or mostly cloud, it's still possible to see the northern lights shining through that cloud. Now, all the displays I've shown you so far have been decidedly green. And if the display is bright, you will see that green with the human eye. But green isn't the only color. I'm going to tell you what causes the colors in a moment. But first of all, let's have a look at a display. This is further south. This is between northern part of Lofoten and Tromsø. And you can see there a lovely green rayed band on the left and those beautiful rays of rosy pink on the right. Now, these colors are being formed very high in the Earth's atmosphere. All auroral activity is caused by electrically charged particles coming down into the atmosphere at very high speed, colliding with the particles of air high above the ground and exciting them so that when they go back to their normal state, they give out a particular color of light. Now, there are two main gases in the air we breathe. Oxygen, about 1/5, and nitrogen, about 4/5. Now, both the colors here, the green and the rosy pink, are caused by excited atoms of oxygen. The green is oxygen between 100 and 150 kilometers above the ground, and the red is between 150 and about 350 kilometers above the ground. But the red is very hard to see with the human eye because our eyes are 5 times less sensitive to red than they are to green. So to see a vivid red display, it needs to be very bright indeed, but the camera will always show it, as you can see here. Now, this particular display, you can see how long the rays are stretching up into the Arctic sky, coming together overhead. And when this happens, you have the chance to see one of the most dramatic of all auroral forms, the auroral corona. It is an amazing structure. You can see again the stars of the Plough or Big Dipper right in the middle of the picture. This is a voyage in March, and you can see that all those auroral rays have come together overhead to produce this multi-pointed structure called a corona or crown. In fact, all of those rays are parallel. It's perspective that makes them appear to radiate out from a point in the sky. A bit like when you're standing on a motorway overbridge and you see the carriageways of the motorway converging on the vanishing point on the horizon. You know they're parallel, but they appear to come from one point in the distance. And it's exactly the same with these rays here. Again, we have green, we have the rosy pink, both excited atoms of oxygen, the red being above the green, but we're looking up through the display into it to the highest extent. Now, the other main gas in the atmosphere is nitrogen, and that also produces colours. So here we can see the green of atmospheric oxygen, a lovely rayed curtain or drape here, and you'll notice a background purple or mauve. That is due to excited atoms of nitrogen, and that can typically be between 250 and 400 kilometers above the ground. Now, nitrogen is a very hard gas to get excited. And so you've either got to bash it hard to get excited, or you have to soften it up with a bit of ultraviolet light. And that is why you often see these displays in late September, early October, or late March, early April, when sunlight is still shining on the very top of the auroral layer, even though it's dark where you are on Earth. But the most beautiful of all auroral colours, again due to atmospheric nitrogen, is the beautiful lilac-y pink that you can see underneath the green band here. And this is one of the most striking of colours. And with the naked eye, it was just as striking as it is on this picture. And in the most active, most vibrant displays, where particles are penetrating down to between 95 and 100 kilometres above the ground, you get excited atoms of nitrogen, and that produces this. You also can get a turquoisey blue or a deeper blue, and that is also excited atoms of nitrogen. So the two colors, the oxygen, the nitrogen colors, all those different colors are just excited atoms of those two gases. So if the aurora is being formed by these energetic particles coming down into the atmosphere, the question is, where do they come from? Well, clearly they come from space. And it was a Norwegian scientist, Christian Birkeland, 120 or so years ago, who first realized what caused the auroral displays. He was absolutely right. The electrically charged particles that are coming down into the atmosphere, funneled down around the north and the south magnetic poles, come from the sun, our nearest star, 93 million miles away. And as the particles are released by the sun, they travel across space at varying speeds. Some of them encounter the Earth and its magnetic field. They're funneled down. They interact with the atmosphere, producing auroral displays. If we have a look at a picture of the sun during a total solar eclipse, you can see there the dark disk and the new moon in the middle, and you see those lovely streamers of the sun's outer atmosphere, the corona, going out into space. And those streamers are streams of particles coming out from the sun, feeding into what we call the solar wind, which is a steady stream of gas and electrically charged particles coming out from the sun all the time at varying speeds. Eventually, typically after a few days, some of those particles will reach the Earth. And there's always some auroral activity visible. Even when the sun is fairly quiet, there's always something to be seen. But when you get an outburst on the sun, and you get a burst of particles shot out by some form of eruption on the sun, then you get the more dramatic displays. So let's see what happens. So here's the sun in yellow, and on the left-hand side, you can see all those particles streaming away from the sun at high speed. They're going out into from the sun at anywhere between 250 kilometers per second and 1,000 kilometers per second. And here's the Earth surrounded by its magnetic field in blue, and the particles from the sun in yellow are slamming into the Earth's magnetic field on the left and wrapping around it and squeezing it. Look at the right-hand side. The magnetic field lines are being squeezed together, and particles are accelerated back towards the north and south magnetic poles. And you can see that glowing ring of light all around the Arctic Circle there. If you look down on the Arctic Circle from a satellite in space, that yellow there, it's not the real color, that yellow there seen by the satellite is where the northern lights are located at this particular moment in time when the picture was taken. You can see Iceland over in the far top left there. You can see the coast of Norway running down there right underneath the auroral display. And in this case, if you were anywhere north of Mulder up towards the Lofoten Islands, you'd be able to see a display of northern lights, and it would be a pretty good one as well. So if you're underneath the aurora, underneath this ribbon of light, what can you see? Well, the range in structures you see is immense. Here, I'm standing on the back of the ship in darkness, looking ahead. There's a funnel there, and you can see this incredible snake-like structure that's coming there. And sometimes it looks a bit like a genie coming out of a bottle. You get this structure that appears quite narrow, and then it widens out, and it really is like a genie soaring up out of a bottle. Really amazing. Here's a display that was right overhead, and you'll notice those incredibly fine lines. This is because I've used a very short exposure on the camera to freeze the movement of the aurora and also freeze the movement of the ship. Taking pictures from a ship and taking them from land are very different. On the ship, you need to use higher speeds, shorter exposures to freeze the action, as it were. And I'm very pleased with this because I managed to freeze those beautiful narrow auroral rays in that arc that was going right overhead. Sometimes when you get an auroral corona, it can look a bit like a firework that's burst coming down into the sky above you. And you can see there just the sort of drama you get. This is south of Tromsø, heading down towards Finnsnes, and you can see there this cascade of light coming down around the sky. But if you're underneath the auroral ribbon and it's active and it's vibrant, the display can go on for quite some time. Great displays sometimes last only a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes. The really immense displays can go on for hours, starting as the sky goes dark in the evening and going on to the early morning. So this is a little movie that I made. The ship is in Svolvær Harbour in the Lofoten, and we're right underneath the auroral ribbon, and you can see the incredible structures unfolding there. This is speeded up 5 times. You can see the water is just like glass, and you can see the aurora there reflected in the water and the lights of Svolvær Harbour as well. Really a quite amazing thing to watch. And this went on for a couple of hours, and then it subsided and went away. On another occasion, as we left Svolvær and we headed up towards the Trollfjord, which is a very famous landmark in that part of the world, we had an even bigger surprise. Here we're heading up towards the Trollfjord. You can see the high rock faces on either side, and you can see in the distance there that the aurora is fairly active. There's some green, a little bit of purple, so it's a sign that there's a lot of energy there. And of course, if the aurora goes up to almost overhead, you've then got the possibility of a corona. And as we went into the Trollfjord, a corona started to form. And the ship got to the end of the Trollfjord. This is early October when the ship could go in. And as it started to do a 180-degree turn to face the other way, this corona was forming up overhead. And I was lying on my back with the camera on my tummy, shouting at everybody to look up, because I knew that whatever was going to happen wasn't going to last long. And in the next 20 seconds, we had the amazing show of the dragon over the Trollfjord. There's the head of the dragon with its horns, the wings of the dragon and its tail. And as the time unfolded, the dragon turned from looking down at us to giving us a profile view. You never really know quite what to expect. And watching this, the hairs on the back of your neck went up as you realize that this was an amazing thing. The Vikings would have seen this. People living thousands of years ago would have seen things like this and not understood exactly what was going on. Normally, the movement is fairly gentle. Sometimes I've speeded it up to show you what's happening, but I have got here an example of one of the fastest moving auroral displays that I've ever seen. And this was again north of Tromsø, and you can see here, this is not speeded up. This is in real time. This is as fast as this display was moving. It's absolutely awesome. The sky crystal clear, this auroral corona directly overhead, rapidly changing. You've got the green, you've got the purple there. Really an amazing sight. And one frame from this movie gives me the bird of paradise aurora. One of my pictures that I'm most pleased with, because it really does look like a bird of paradise. You never know the structures and shapes you're going to see, and no two auroral displays are the same. But the great thing about going on the ship is this is a shared experience. There's nothing like standing out on the deck with 100, 200 others, watching the display grow before your eyes, becoming brighter, fading, brightening, people willing it to do something, and then the great oohs and ahs when you get a great display. It really is a wonderful shared experience. And sometimes you get an experience that you're not expecting. Aliens. No. This is a launch from the Andøya rocket range in northern Norway, and they are creating an artificial aurora in the sky. The rocket is releasing electrically charged particles into the upper atmosphere, and they are studying how they move to work out the speed and direction of winds in the upper atmosphere. So you never quite know what you're going to get. And by the way, in the background there is a faint green arc of the real aurora as a backdrop to the artificial one that the scientists are creating. Here's another shot over the fjords, lovely calm night, looking up the fjords towards this amazing looping, swirling structure. No matter how you see your first Northern Lights display, you will never forget it. And I warn you, they are addictive. Once you've seen a great display, you want to see another one. You don't know if it'll be better than the ones you've seen already, but you hope it will. And every single trip I do, I go into this with the expectation that I'm going to see something better than I've seen before. But even if I don't, I always see something different to what I've seen before. The Northern Lights are truly nature's greatest light show, and to see them best, you've got to travel into the Arctic Circle between the end of September and the beginning of April to be in the best place for the best view in the house. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. That was amazing. I think all the comments in the chat are saying what an amazing presentation, how amazing that all the spectacular shots that you've taken and been able to capture them has been amazing. Which brings me on to our next tour with you, Dr. John. We do have 2 sailings next year on the 26th of January and the 23rd of February, where you can join Dr. John Mason on board our brand new ship, MS Maud. This is a 15-day trip for £4,299 per person. We have lots included, as this is our expedition ship, so it's brand new to our market as of next year. Sailing from Dover, and as you can see, you go up all along the coast of Norway there. We have our Book with Confidence. So if you were to book this, you can book on your own terms, you can cancel the cruise for any reason, and we'll pay you back, no questions. So it does give you that flexibility to join. There are a number of single supplements. For full details, you can find this on hurtigruten.co.uk to find out a little bit more information. But for those of you that have joined Dr. Mason previously, this is another amazing chance to go see the Northern Lights with Dr. John Mason and listen to all of his fantastic experiences. We have had quite a few messages and questions, John. I know you've covered a lot of it in your presentation, but
no worries, I'm happy to do whatever you want.
Excellent, thank you. So one of the questions I have here is, are there any spectacles that can help you view all the colours of the Northern Lights?
I'm afraid not. The colours are basically, obviously, as they're perceived by the eye. And in any group of people that I've had on board, there'll be some who basically will see the colours quite easily. And it's not necessarily a matter of age. I've had younger people who couldn't see the colours very well, and people of my age who could, and vice versa. Everybody's eyes are as different at night as they are in the daytime. There is no optical aid really that will help you see the colours better, other than obviously taking pictures like I've done, which enables you to see them vividly. But with the human eye, you've got to hope that there is a display bright enough, vibrant enough, active enough to give you the colours that you can perceive.
Excellent. How do you personally get a time lapse of the Northern Lights on board the ship?
Basically, when you're taking from a ship, you learn about the movement of the ship. So you can basically work out, if you're standing on the deck, that the ship has a rhythm. And when you've traveled on it as much as I have, you get used to that rhythm, that roll. And you know that as it moves, it sort of moves and it stops for a moment before it goes back the other way. Obviously, if it's a gale and the rest of it, I don't worry about taking pictures, I just watch. But if you've got even a reasonably calm sea, and when you're sailing between the fjords and the sounds and in between the islands, you can get some really, really calm waters. I've had some staggeringly calm waters where I've been able to take time pictures of the stars of 15, 20 seconds, and the stars have been pin sharp. So the key is wide angle lenses, short exposures, high ISOs, take lots of pictures. You'll be throwing many of them away, but you'll have some gems among the ones you take. On a really busy voyage, I might take 3,500 pictures, of which probably only 1 in 10 are what I would call good, but that's still plenty. And you don't need a fancy camera. These days, there are people who've got the better quality phones who have been able to take quite reasonable pictures with their phones, but phones can be a real nuisance on deck if you do not turn the screen brightness down. Because when you're holding the phone up and the bright screen shining in your eye, firstly, it ruins your night vision, and it ruins the night vision of everybody standing behind you. So I try and discourage people from using that sort of equipment unless they've turned the screen brightness down. It's the same on the back of your camera, turn the screen brightness down. But you don't need fancy equipment. You just need a little bit of method and technique, and I'll tell you about that in one of my talks, and hopefully you'll get something.
Sounds amazing. Another question I have here is, what has been your most memorable Northern Lights experience?
There have been many. The dragon over the Troll Fjord has got to be a highlight. The Bird of Paradise aurora was another one. These were just astonishing. There was also another auroral display, which was a really good one, and it suddenly brightened to such an extent that it cast shadows on the deck where we were standing. It was so intense. It was as though someone had turned on a light overhead and all the shadows, but it was natural auroral light. My pictures of it didn't come out because they were all overexposed, because the brilliance of the illumination for that 10-15 seconds was so high that obviously all the colors had gone. But I suppose in terms of a night to remember, it would have to be back in January of 2012, excuse me, when I was on the Midnat Sol, as it was, which was the original name for the Maud before she was refit. I was on the Midnat Sol traveling out of Tromsø towards Skjelve, and the aurora had begun about 6:30 in the evening, and it would go on until the early morning hours. There'd been a major eruption on the sun the previous day, and we happened to be in the right place at the right time, and we had a succession of amazing episodes of auroral activity that night, probably half a dozen of them. It would rise in activity, you get an auroral corona, then it would slowly dissipate, and then after 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, it would rise again, another corona, and it just went on all night. And there was about 250 of us out on deck, and a reporter in Stockholm had got wind of what was happening and phoned me on the deck of the ship, and I described to him live as it was happening exactly what was going on, and he could hear the cheers of the people and whoops and people going, "Oh God, that was amazing," on the phone because I was doing it. And that story got in every newspaper around the world, Africa, Asia, South America, USA. It was a happy news story. People seeing something that nature provides for free, enjoying it with other people who felt the same way. You can't really beat that.
Yeah, that sounds phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Another question I've had here is, how reliant are the Northern Lights on the solar activity cycle, typically 7 years? And where are we in that cycle now?
Right, okay. Well, the cycle is about 11 years, and we basically had a minimum in 2008, a broad maximum that lasted from 2012 to 2015, then a decline, and another minimum that went on from really about 2018, 2019. We're just coming out that minimum. However, several of the pictures I have shown you in this talk were taken at solar minimum. When the sun is very active, you will get more frequent eruptions, but even when the sun is inactive in the sense that there aren't many sunspots, you still get things called coronal holes that push out enormous outbursts of particles, and you can get tremendous auroral displays. So I have been traveling every year, starting in one solar minimum, going through solar maximum, going through the next solar minimum, and I'm now about to start traveling as we come out of that minimum. And there hasn't been a single trip when I haven't seen great northern lights, sometimes amazing northern lights. So yes, there is a dependency on the 11-year solar cycle, but when you're up in the Arctic Circle, it's nowhere near as marked as you might think.
And that actually brings us on to the next question perfectly, where we've been asked, are there many cruises where the lights don't appear? And of course, with Hurtigruten, and especially with your voyage here, we do have the Northern Lights promise. where we promise if you do not see the Northern Lights on your voyage, we will give you another voyage free of charge. So yeah, there's lots of information about that on our website. But from your experience, Dr. John, how many times have you not seen the lights on board?
Never. I basically, when I'm on the ship, I am out most of the night and I am watching what's going on. And if I see something, I tell the crew and they wake everybody up. Now, if you haven't turned on the loudspeaker in your cabin and you don't hear the announcement or you sleep through it, there's not a lot we can do about that. And unfortunately, it does happen. And you often find that people who've traveled on my trips end up sleeping partially clothed, fully clothed. Sometimes they have all their clothes laid out in reverse order so they can get them on quickly. But let me give you an example. On one trip, when I made an announcement for the Northern Lights at 2:45 in the morning, I timed how long it took people to get out on deck. The fastest was 1 minute 55 seconds, the slowest 12.5 minutes. And by that time, most of the activity had subsided. So if there is an announcement made, you've got to react quickly. You've got to get out on deck as quick as you can. And I always say to people, practice putting on your clothes, practice the fastest route from your cabin onto the deck outside. And bear in mind, of course, it will take you a while for your eyes to get accustomed to the dark if you've been inside on the brightly lit ship. That is why I tend to stay outside most of the time.
And can that be quite cold?
Bitter. But as the Norwegians will tell you, there's no such thing as cold weather, only bad clothing. So this can be very cold, particularly when the wind is blowing. There is nothing worse than the wind chill. You can have a temperature that may be 0 to 5 degrees, but if you've got a brisk breeze blowing, it'll feel like -10, and it really cuts right through you. So you really do need to be adequately clothed, and you need to wear windproof clothing, proper hat, proper gloves, proper covering around your face, and be able to operate your camera with your gloves. That takes practice as well.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a skill to have when viewing the Northern Lights up in Norway. I have another question here. How did the scientists do the chemical analysis to work out the distances?
Right, you work out the distances not using chemical analysis, but using triangulation. So what you do is you have two groups of people observing the Northern Lights at the same time. And these days, of course, it's easy to do digital imaging. In the old days, it was photography. And you take pictures of the Northern Lights display from these two locations, typically 50, 60, 70 kilometers apart. And then you compare the pictures. And from the two different views, you triangulate to get the heights of the aurora above the ground. The colors, due to the different chemical interactions, what you can do is you can look at the spectrum of the color of light being emitted, and you can compare that to laboratory spectra that we can create. And because we know the two main gases in the atmosphere are oxygen and nitrogen, and we know the wavelengths of the various emission lines of those two gases, you can work out which colors relate to which gas.
And are there any special solar events coming up in this year or even next year when your voyage does depart?
You never ever can tell what the sun is going to do. Now, the great thing is that solar activity has kicked off really strongly this year. We came out of that deep minimum in 2018, 2019 into early 2020. And then by the end of last year, into the beginning of this year, there's quite a lot of solar activity. We have had some amazing Northern Lights displays so far this year. The only sad thing is I've not been up there to see them because of the travel ban. But if I had have been, I would have been in the right place at the right time to see what have been some truly fantastic displays already this year. And put it this way, I wouldn't choose to go on a trip if I didn't think I was going to see something good. So the fact that I've picked those dates to go on means that I'm expecting to see something. Now, you can never tell about the weather. You might have a bad spell of weather. But as I've said, even if you've got gaps in the clouds or short breaks in the clouds or even thin cloud, you can still see the northern lights through that. And I've rarely found a trip ever where I haven't had some hours of clear sky on several of the nights to be able to view northern lights. Now, I used to do the 12-day trip, which was 11 nights. On the best ever trip, I saw northern lights 10 nights out of 11. Now, that was pretty special. But on the worst trip, I saw northern lights 4 nights out of 11. So there you are. I can only report it as I've seen it over the last 15 or so years.
That's amazing. Well, I think we'll leave it there for the questions. We have so many. And guys, please take a look on hertogruton.co.uk. Some more questions may be answered on the website for you there. This is being recorded and will be sent round to everyone that's registered. So you will have the chance to catch up with this again if you did miss anything. Dr. John Mason, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure.
Very informative, and everyone's given some great feedback there. So thank you again.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.